Okay, then I shall begin. Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Improving Textile Value Chain Efficiency, a Sustainable Approach to Colour Communication for Brands, sponsored by X-Rite. In this webinar, we will discuss new ways to optimise your current textile workflow with a meaningful colour specification process. This enhanced approach eliminates the subjectivity that leads to waste and rework to increase brand colour compliance, control and consistency, improve time to market by 75%, and reduce the overall carbon footprint for the textile industry. Our speakers today are Peter Mulder, Global Strategic Account Manager in X-Rite Pantone's global brand team. He supports local, regional and global consumer packaged goods and textile brands implement, manage and sustain a digital colour workflow throughout the supply chain to protect brand integrity and enhance brand equity and meet sustainability goals. Our second speaker today is Raf Muller, Solutions Architect, also as part of X-Rite's and Pantone's global brand team. Raf has a global experience and exposure to products, services and solutions for the footwear and apparel supply chain to improve time to market, to reduce waste and to increase colour accuracy, achievability and consistency. Just for a little housekeeping before we get started, if you have any questions during this presentation, please type them in the Q&A question box in your Zoom control panel. These questions are not visible for other participants and therefore will not be an introduction. These will be responded to at the end of the presentation. And with that, I will open today's webinar. Over to you.
Yeah, hi Lucy, thank you for the introduction and the mouthful of words of impressive things we do. My name is Peter Mulder. I'm account manager working with brands indeed, helping them to implement a digital color workflow. And in the case of textile, helping, let's say, to get supply chain efficiency, which is also giving a sustainable approach towards color communication and approval for brands. So this is who we are. Don't dwell on it. You will receive the deck later on. And also during the Q&A sessions, you can see who you are and how you can contact us after this webinar. So why are brands, clients working with us? Because color can go wrong in many ways. And yes, as you can see on the screen, let's say there are many orange colors. But which one is the right one? And that is always very important. So if there is a certain design intent, you want to be sure that the production is the same. And that is where, let's say, our services, our platforms, our hardware and software comes in. And also, of course, our knowledge. And Raf is going to touch on that later on as well. So the goal for every brand is there is a design intent and we want to produce it wherever around the world the same way. So it looks good on shelf or it looks good in the retail or in the clothing shops. I already mentioned we can help, and that is what we would like to explain to you today. So first, a little bit about our company, then a little bit about the traditional textile industry, and then small steps, how we can support brands to go up to the color maturity ladder in order to implement a complete digital workflow and have the advantages. And we're going to look at that step by step. X-Rite Pantone. So we are a well-known company in any industry actually, but especially in print and packaging and also in the textile industry. So we're a leader in color science and technology. We always say, so Pantone is 100% daughter of X-Rite. We call Pantone the art of color. They're working with brands in order to ensure the right color is chosen to communicate to the end consumer, whereby X-Rite is the science of color. Once, let's say, the color is chosen to communicate to the end consumer, our solutions, our science is ensuring that it is produced right and consistent. So we're enabling customers around the world to have color consistency and have the color they want. Industries we service, well, you're probably sitting behind your laptop right now. If you look around the room, or if you're in your car, or if you're in your home or in your kitchen, I'm pretty sure that 50% of all products has been touched by one of our solutions, whether it's the supply of ink, whether it's formulation software for the ink, that is what I mean, whether it's, let's say, the packaging of your beverage cans, everything, we're supporting everybody around the globe, all the industries. Today, we're going to focus, as you can imagine, on the textile industry. So let me move on quickly. Digital transformation in the textile industry. Of course, let's say there are many brands that already adopted this, but if you look at the textile industry itself, it is quite traditional. And there is a little bit of a surprise, and I'm moving on that one on the next slide later on, because what you see in other industries and what you see around the world, especially during COVID, and we've seen that as well when we're talking to brands, they say, hey, Xrite, how can you help us? Because during COVID, they were forced to implement a digital color workflow, and they also saw the advantages of this digital color workflow, of this digital transformation. First of all, it's data-driven decision-making. Later on, we're going to explain that there are various steps, and in the end, you'll get to the mainstream cloud technologies, which is also what the end goal is. Data security, data privacy, that is very important. And also there, we're going to touch base on when we start talking about how to communicate a color, a digital color, a QTX to the supply chain. So Raf is going to explain about that. And very important, of course, in the textile industry, speed and visibility from design to production. So we're going to talk about that later on. So you will see before COVID, especially, let's say, during COVID, but now also after COVID, a lot of brands would like to adopt a digital color workflow and transform digitally. But if you look at the textile industry, it's pretty traditional. And we always say there is the certain, often physical sampling, it's the human eye impact. And that is, in a way, very dangerous because it's very subjective and not objective. So I might look at a color on a morning completely different than when I'm tired and overworked. At least that is what I'm saying to my boss, overworked on a Friday afternoon. Or maybe, let's say, when I had a glass of wine during dinner and then I need to analyze a certain color that will have impact on how I judge a color. While the technology is there, what we see, and I always call it fax versus email versus cloud behavior, it's like in the past, we would send an order via fax. And then you could start the production, or you give your color okay via fax, or you might call somebody. When email was introduced, then in the beginning, still the fax was sent in order, let's say, to ensure the email really reached the person you want to talk to. And now you have cloud-based solutions. But in the textile industry, it looks like sometimes brands and suppliers are still in the fax world. And that is what I think throughout the presentation, you will see how we can support to move, let's say, brands from the fax world into cloud-based solutions. So there is certain reluctance of moving or adopting digitization because it's considered either expensive or, let's say, there's too much risk just to trust the science data, which is, a little bit funny because when you're in school, 1 + 1 is 2. So why would that not apply in the textile industry when you have measuring equipment that are going to tell you whether a color is in or out of specification? And once, let's say, and that is what we will see as well, and it's something Lucy mentioned, if you look at the benefits for footwear and apparel brands, that is enormous. So it's giving actually a competitive edge. So let me take you through what we call color maturity ladder or the color maturity model. And that is how we are working with textile brands. Whether it's apparel, whether it's footwear, it doesn't really matter. So if you look at, let's say, ladder 1, that is when a textile brand is just working visual. So that's it. They receive a dip and they don't have any preconditions, like conditions, they will say go or no go based on the physical sample they received. There are also, but so that is again still very subjective. Also, if you look at model 2, it's still very subjective. Although there is a color standard, and although there is controlled lighting, it's still physical sampling that is ruling this way of working. If you move to step 3, then basically what you will see, there's gonna be objectivity in there, because ink formulation and also spectrophotometer, so proper color management, is introduced. Nevertheless, it still have complications, and we're gonna explain that, or Rav is gonna explain that in a 5-step approach. What we would recommend, and that is what we're how we are working, recommend for brands, is moving up to ladder 4, whereby you have a connected workflow. So not only the brand, but also the supply chain is using the same sets of tools. So it's digital color data, it is spectrophotometers, it's lighting conditions, but ensuring that the communication is cloud-based. So it's all connected, it's all instant, so huge benefits. Later on, I will start talking about appearance. So that's the, I wouldn't say the holy grail, but that is for very advanced textile brands that are also working on 3D platform in order to see how a color will appear in a certain format. So we have one question right now in order to learn where you are. So Lucy is showing here the questions. So the poll question is, where do you think you fall in the color maturity model? So step 1 is visual only. Step 2 is visual plus physical sampling. Step 3, digital standards, spectrophotometer, light boot is introduced. Step 4, also cloud-based information. And step 5 is appearance and 3D. Lucy, can you say when I need to move on? Then I will move on to the next slide.
I would suggest maybe giving it a little bit longer.
Yep.
We can move on to the next slide now. Thank
Excellent. You. Okay, let me try to get. So what is color maturity model 1 and 2? So it's a little story about brand Lisa and supplier Mike. One second. Okay. So this is a typical way of working. When we talk to brands, we see this happening often, whereby Lisa is working on a certain design. She's having working with Pantone, so looking for inspiration. She selects a color, and then basically once she selects a color, she hands it over, whether it's a physical sample or Mike is ordering the physical sample. Then she's asking, match as close as possible. But if I say match as close as possible, that is very subjective. How close? And is it possible? So there's a disconnect between what she wants, the design intent, and what Mike is going to deliver. So Mike is going to try and basically starts the dip process. And what's happening is that he's sending 5 dip samples back for Lisa to make a choice. But she still doesn't know whether it's the right color she really wanted. So she asked Mike to go back and start the dip process again. One second, I've got some issues here. Yeah, okay. And the comment she's saying to supplier Mike is, I want it to be darker, I want it to be brighter. And of course, that is also very subjective. Mike doesn't have a clue. So a question mark in his head. and you will see still a disconnect, the red cross. And if this is happening over and over again, it's time consuming, it's expensive, there's a lot of waste and not good for the carbon footprint, sending these samples backwards and forwards. And in the end, Lisa is not satisfied, and closer, let's say, to the production date, she might accept something that is not really what she intended to design. So again, it's best intent and subjective communication. That is not saying anybody's doing a bad job, it's just very subjective and everybody's trying their best. Again, the human eye impact, I already explained that. There's no tolerance information. There could be a mismatch between the dip expectation or the dip tolerances versus the bulk production itself. There might be different lighting conditions or no hardware specifications or no operating procedure or color manual in place. And that is giving a challenge for supplier Mike to meet, let's say, the demand, the design intent from Lisa. So I'm going to hand it over now to Raf. He's going to explain. So I just, let's say, give a brief introduction when Lisa is just working with one supplier, and Raf is now going to take an example whereby Lisa is working with two suppliers, and we're calling that when brands suffer from the error stack. It's increasing inconsistency across the supply chain.
Thank you very much, Peter, and good afternoon, good morning, good day to everybody. As Peter mentioned, there are always a series of challenges when working in a traditional fashion, just working with a single supplier. Maybe it's your initial supplier, maybe it's your prime supplier, but working in the traditional method brings some challenges. However, thinking about how those challenges are then magnified, even when you have taken the initial steps towards digital communication, is also a worthwhile exercise. And what we show here is a typical kind of workflow and some of the typical challenges that people see. We call it the error stack because it is a case whereby deviations build on additional deviations so that we end up much further away from our desired color standard than anybody would have initially anticipated. So you can see on the screen here, there is a physical master standard that lives in Lisa's office. Obviously, that's the master standard. That's the main brand standard. Never leaves the office. Nobody would dare to lose it. So a copy is made, which is close. It's 0.2 delta E and shipped as a physical standard. So please, Peter. Mike receives that physical standard and then has to do his dipping, his dyeing, and attempts to rematch that physical standard that he has received. He ends up about 0.6 away, so not perfect, but he gets approval and then starts production. His production is then 0.5 away from his approved batch. Again, by itself, it doesn't sound like a disastrous number. 0.5 delta E, for those people who are not familiar with it, would normally be regarded as a reasonably good match. Most people will be happy with that. However, if you look at the cumulative effect, what you see is you've moved, and in this instance, you've moved 1.3 delta E away from the initial standard, and all of this deviation is on the light side for sake of argument. That's just one supplier. Now introduce a second supplier, and what you see is the same kinds of deviations. Again, individually, nobody would say anyone's done a bad job at 0.3 delta E. Nobody would say, nobody would cry foul or be alarmed at 0.4 delta E. But these variations add up. They become cumulative because they are being taken from each step during the process. What that means is, in this case, Mike ends up 1.3 units lighter John ends up 1.2 units darker. And the cumulative difference, all of a sudden, from small differences, the errors have stacked up and you're 2.5 delta E away. And again, for those people not so familiar with 2.5 delta E in textile terms, that's a long way, okay? So the color has varied significantly, all based on this step-by-step approach, which is quite common. And obviously that then causes consternation, it causes rework late in the day, it causes lots of fingers to be pointed as to where things have gone wrong. It's not an efficient and often not a productive way of working. Next one, please, Peter. To avoid this error stack, there are a number of things, there are a number of parts that should be put in place. A lot of suppliers have looked at this and have started to address individual elements. We call these solutions in isolation. So a lot of customers and a lot of brands that we work with have started to look at how parts of this puzzle can be improved. Okay, they're working towards that level 4 color maturity. So if we look at the pieces of the puzzle, and we've broken them down here into 5 pieces, you can, and quite often people will, put in individual solutions. So people will have a standard operating procedure. People might have a hardware specification. Others might look a little bit at correlation or instrument servicing, calibration. We know a number of people that without any of the other steps have simply tried digital communication, and others who have tried putting stuff into some kind of electronic document. Again, in isolation, they are pieces of the puzzle and still end up with a disconnect. If we go to the next one, please, Peter. If we look initially at standard operating procedures, and I'll say this up front, we strongly believe that it is always necessary to have standard operating procedures. Okay, standard operating procedures are the building blocks that give you a specification so that an approved color can be defined as being inside specification or outside specification based on an agreed way of working. If you don't have an agreed way of working, if you don't have an agreed way of measuring, if somebody's still measuring in inches when you're working in millimeters, then things are not going to work. So standard operating procedures absolutely are necessary. But, of course, they're still subject to how people work with those standard operating procedures, whether they follow them precisely, whether they follow them as the operating procedures were intended. By themselves, they can't deliver consistent color across a supply chain. It's just not enough. We do have a question based on the ideas that we're floating, or we have some questions again for the poll. So if we look at those poll questions, if you could fill them in, please, that would be really appreciated. Do you have a color manual or standard? Is it current? Does it need updating? Is it something that people can use help with? So if you can fill in the poll questions, please, just so we get a picture of where people are as we proceed. Yes, thank you. I think we're just about there. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody. We talked about standard operating procedures, and of course, any measurement system. So anybody that's starting or working on that journey towards digital needs to use some measurement equipment. Of course, we need to remember with a hardware specification, not all spectrophotometers are the same. There are different geometries, there are different makes. Not all spectrophotometers of the same geometry measure the same. And in fact, the investigations that have been undertaken, both by ourselves and by many other parties, indicate that actually only 2 of the recognized manufacturers of spectrophotometers have instruments where the data is comparable and seriously comparable within industry requirements. Having an instrument which is comparable is necessary for your hardware specification. That's a baseline, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee that those spectrophotometers are working within the appropriate levels, within the appropriate measurement tolerances and parameters that they're supposed to. And that should be monitored day by day. Again, it means that there can be a disconnect between what Lisa specifies and what Mike produces. So it's necessary to take a next step on that one. Please, Peter. And if we simply look at 2 different instruments in a scenario where there is no appropriate hardware specification, then this is a very common scenario. And I have to say, we do get a lot of calls and mails that relate back to this very, very problem. Somebody set a standard using a benchtop instrument. They've read the standard and they've got some digital values back. In this case, a hypothetical 5000. The same sample shipped to a supplier using a different category, using a different instrument. And all of a sudden, the same sample is now delivering different values. And of course, that is simply because not all spectrophotometers read the same. Okay? Managing that fleet of spectrophotometers, managing that hardware specification is really, really important, because you can see the level of difference that can impart. I will be honest, on some kinds of materials, you are likely to see much higher deviation values than this. Okay? So managing that hardware specification is a key part also of being successful with the program. Thanks, Peter. So with that in mind, we have our next question. And again, really appreciate the feedback. It lets us understand where you are and how best we can help, and how the tools that we're going to talk will benefit you through the process. Yeah, and again, I think we have nearly all of the answers in. Couple more. Excellent. Yeah, thank you, Peter. So we talked about having a hardware specification, but we also mentioned that just having that hardware specification correct is necessary, but not necessarily sufficient. You have to have that, but it's not necessarily enough, because one of the features of any instrumentation in the field is, of course, it needs to be maintained. It needs to always, always, always be pulled back so that it's measuring in exactly the right place and in the same way as other instruments in the field. We do know that there are some competitive offerings out there that will check to see how far an instrument has deviated. We prefer to use a tool which is called Net Profiler that actually corrects for that in-field deviation. So Net Profiler is a utility. It's a service. It's a software service that allows a user to check, manage, and crucially correct the performance of their instrument. So their instrument is always pulled back to the center point. The same center points are the same center point as other instruments of its category. And that's really important, because now you know that when you're measuring something, you are measuring in the same way as everyone else in the field that's using the same kind of technology. Your instrument is right. And because it is a self-delivered service, i.e. you do it when you feel like it, you can check once a month is a minimum recommendation. You can check once a week. You can check once a day if you want it. There's no penalty other than time. So you have assurance that your instrument is reading as it should, and therefore your values are correct. It brings everything back to the center point, which is great. But of course, we also need to communicate more than just the hardware, even if that hardware is correct. We need to communicate more than just standard operating procedures, even if everybody is folding their fabric sample 4 times now. What are the tolerances? What are the illuminants? What are we matching under? And again, without that piece of the puzzle, we don't have everything. Again, if we have just a spectrophotometer, uncorrected, measuring sample to sample, and now we've got the right kind of hardware specification, we expect that we will see some deviation, or there is the potential there for some deviation. Of course, one is in humidity control, the other is drifted away from that a little bit in the production facility. So we are getting deviations. If we then apply the Net Profiler, then what we see is that those deviations, because of the instrumental condition, those are pulled back into a central point. It does not mean that the difference is 0. Okay, it doesn't mean the difference is 0, but it means that that difference is absolutely minimized. Now, Net Profiler works, of course, on X-Rite equipment, but it also works on the major competitors' equipment as well, where, of course, those instruments are the same hardware category. So this gives a flexible system. It gives an open system. It allows a user and their user base to deploy Net Profiler and be assured that they can use it on the instruments that they currently have. Next one, please, Peter. So we talked a little bit before about some of the necessaries, and we mentioned standards. Commonly, very commonly, people using digital data will exchange a QTX file. A QTX file, for people that have not come across it, is really a very, very simple text file that contains the measurement data, the reflectance data of a measured sample, and a couple of additional parameters. There are some really significant challenges with QTX. Because it is such a simple file format and it is text editable, then it is always open to misuse. We unfortunately know of a number of instances where suppliers have either accidentally or deliberately manipulated the contents of the QTX. It's very simple to accidentally change some of those reflectance values, maybe in your benefit. It's not a secure file format. And actually the ISO, the International Standards Organization, have issued a format for color exchange, but they didn't pick QTX. They picked something far more secure. Other challenges with QTX is, of course, there's no traceability. So if I send a QTX out today, that QTX, it's a file format, that can be sent round from person to person to person, or it can sit on somebody's computer for the next 5 years. Is it out of date? Is it still current? Is there a newer version? Is there an older version? Has it been withdrawn? Nobody knows, and nobody can trace where that QTX is. It's out there in the wild. It almost has a life of its own. And again, we see this far too often. People have a QTX, so I'm not sure that you have the latest up-to-date version. We reapproved that color last year. Have you got Spring 18? Have you got the one from Spring 16? With the QTX file, it's not traceable. What we much rather do is work with our suppliers to utilize the Pantone Live Cloud, which is a cloud-based solution. The fact that it is a cloud-based solution drives two things inherently. One, security, because it's a secure cloud platform. Nobody can tamper with the data. Nobody can change the data. Nobody can modify the data. And two, it means that should there be an update, should there be a new color, should there be some change, that change is almost instantaneous. As soon as the data is posted to the cloud, or as soon as the revision is posted to the cloud, then that revision, that new data is available to the entire supply chain that's hooked up to the cloud. So we have many of the building blocks. We've got operating procedures. We know how things should be folded and presented and conditioned. We've got a hardware specification, so we're using the right kind of instrumentation. We have correlation and calibration so that we know that the right kind of instrumentation is behaving properly. We have digital color standards in the cloud, so they're safe, secure, and up to date, but we still need to communicate what's acceptable, what is acceptable, and under what light conditions and what sources. And to do that, we have a color specification document, which is, we believe, a unique way of locking and securing a digital file, a digital document that contains all of the necessary parameters, illuminants, how many illuminants, what the tolerances are, whether or not we have to consider other indices, whiteness, UV calibration. We can lock all of these into a color specification document. So from a supplier's perspective, things become really simple because they open the color specification document and the details, the requirements from the SOP, the tolerances, the illuminants are already there. They don't have to scramble about. They don't have to worry that they're not following the right specification. It's built into that electronic document. So we're nearly there.
Yep.
Now, Lisa and Mike need to communicate to each other, and Peter's going to talk about that part. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Raf, for telling us about the building blocks. And as you can see, there are still 5 colors of green. And what we would like to do, and that is via a true digital way to communicate and control color, is move it into the cloud. So what Raf showed is with the color specification document, initially he showed the error stack of 2.5. And by introducing a color specification document, the total variation is now reduced truly in specification, typically, let's say, for textile brands of 6.5. If we look at all, let's say, these solutions in isolation, and what we want to do in order to move to color maturity level 4 is to connect these via a cloud-based communication platform, and that's the Textile Color Hub. And you can see now, all these 5 building blocks, they now have the same color, which is what Lisa wants, but actually, which is also what Mike wants. If he has the clarity, what he needs to do, guess what? He will benefit from the digital communication workflow as well. because digitization of design and sampling is bringing not only, let's say, a sustainable approach for textile brands, but it's improving the color communication and the approval process significantly. First of all, and I think that is very important nowadays, you will see it with many textile brands, you know, there is a need for sustainability. So taking the route into digital communication and start using the Textile Color Hub, there is no need for physical sampling. There is a 95% first time right. So when the supplier receives, let's say, the color specification document, he starts the dip process himself. He only uploads back to the, and I'm gonna go over the details later on, he uploads only the best match, gets the approval, start production. And it's improvement for the brand, 75% when we're talking time to market. It's an open eco hardware system. So of course we would like suppliers to use and brands to use X-Rite bench stops, but it can also be used with competitive bench stops. It's reduction of waste because if you look at first time right, it means only one wash up, only one dip process need to start. And with no need for physical sampling, there is the reduction of carbon footprint. And now you will see at the bottom, Lisa and Mike are a happy bunch. They got approval because digitization has taken place. If you look at the process, and it's going to be slightly long to explain, but in the last slide, I will show you the benefit to the brand and to the supplier that actually this whole process, if everybody is ready, can only take 2 days. So if you look on the left-hand side, you have the brand. Then either, let's say, the brand is using a Panto TCX color standard, or, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later on, we now also have the opportunity whereby private colors are also uploaded into the Panto Live Cloud. And brands are even able to digitize their own private colors and upload it to the same color cloud. So this digital color cloud is very important because that is where all the spectral color data is hosted. The brand then has a piece of software, and we call it quality control and specification software. And in that software, they're going to create a color specification document. And Rav already explained, in that document, there is the spectral color data, illuminant requirements, and the tolerance information. It's all embedded. It's all secured. Nobody can touch it. You can download it, but I'll get back to that later on. So once that color specification document is created, the brand will upload it to the Textile Color Hub. And in the Textile Color Hub, they will select which supplier need to start producing or the dip, start the complete production afterwards, but initially, let's say, start the dipping process. So they will be notified that something is ready to get started. So now you will see we move to the supplier. So the supplier gets information that there is a color specification document for him to work on. So he opens the color specification document. He looks up in the digital color cloud. So the color library that was created or that is used by the brand is also used by the supplier. And then he starts the dipping process. The advantage is, and I already mentioned that, only once he needs to do the dip process. Because once he has, let's say, these 5 samples, which Mike was initially sending over to Lisa, what he's doing now, he's measuring these 5 samples and only uploads the best match that is within specification back into his own color specification document, and then he loads it to the Textile Color Hub. Then the brand will be notified and they will give approval to the dip so that the production can start. So it looks like a lot of steps, but if you look at it, and even I can do it. And I'm a sales guy, so not technical, doesn't know anything about software. But even in 5 minutes, I'm able to create a design. I'm able to create a color specification document, because in the template that is created in the specification software, the illuminant information and the tolerant information is already embedded. So in 5 minutes, I upload a design and I notify a supplier. And it can be one supplier, it can be 10 suppliers, it can be supplier in, let's say, in Peru for footwear, it can be a supplier in Vietnam for footwear, or for apparel in India. At the same time, suppliers can be notified. They start the DIP process again, they upload their color specification document, which includes, let's say, the best color match, and they will get the approval and start the production. The power for the brand as well is that they can compare how suppliers look to each other, or not how they look to each other, how, let's say, the color looks to each other. So they can compare whether they see color consistency or color variation of the various lab dips from the suppliers. So if the supplier is ready to start straight away, and let's assume he needs 1 or 2 working days for a lab dip, then all of a sudden, rather than sending 5 samples backwards and forwards, what Lisa initially was doing, and Mike didn't know what to do, all of a sudden, it's reduced from 3 months to 2 working days. And that is, let's say, also the proof point for the brands, which is what I presented earlier. It's 95% first time right and 75% improvement for a time to market. Because, typically the situation is that a supplier is not really waiting for a color hub, for a color specification document, but it is in the planning phase. But again, 75% improvement time to market. I want to show this again in order for you not to get lost in the workflow, but these are the benefits of digitization into the textile industry. Moving away from traditional, that is where we started, looking at the various building blocks, connecting these building blocks into a cloud-based solution, which is the Textile Color Hub, and then you will get the benefits for the brand as well as the benefits for the supply chain. So now we have poll question number 4, and I promise this is the last poll question. Would you like to talk, maybe not to me, I guess you can not vote if you want to talk to me or to Raf, but if, let's say, you want to talk to a color expert to talk around this digital color workflow, please select the options that are listed. Yes, I would like to schedule a free textile color hub demo. No, contact me 3 months from now, or no, leave me alone. I hope that's not the case. You see, Raf, how many, if I'm good to go? I cannot see that.
Just the answers are still coming in, Peter. So
Oh, very good. Does it look good for us?
it always looks good, Peter. Responses and feedback from our potential customers and audience is always good. I think we're there now, though.
Good. So what we've shown you today is helping textile brands to move away from visual and subjective, all the way climbing the ladder towards color maturity level 4, measured and objective with a connected workflow. Once, let's say, textile brands start implementing that, they will have a competitive edge, and that is where we can help. And in the beginning, design intent, you want to match that with the production outcome. That is where we can help. We deliberately didn't speak a lot about the hardware, the software itself, but I just want to show you one slide, what we call X-Rite Pantone, the power of one. So we talk about color system. You know, we are a specifier when it comes to Pantone colors, and those are hosted in the cloud, which is in Pantone Live. And we are already mentioned, we have a new add-on, which is the private library manager, where brands can manage, can digitize their own private colors. We do have spectrophotometers that service the textile market. We have a unique, and I call it here calibration, but Ralph clearly explained its correlation and ensuring that devices are brought back to the same central point. So we call it the power of net profiler. It's unique in the marketplace. Then we have the quality control and specification software, which is IQC, Color IQC. We do have our own light boots, so very a lot of brands and a lot of suppliers are using this. We have the cloud-based communication via the Textile Color Hub, and for the dye houses, we also have formulation software. So this is the only, let's say, slide we're going to show some of our products, because what we want to talk about was moving the traditional industry into a cloud-based digital communication workflow. If you're interested about color maturity level 5, we'll probably set up a different webinar to talk about that. Once you receive the deck, or once you look at the recording again, you know, you can go to xrite.com at Pantora Software, more information about that, but we're not going to touch base on this right now, which brings us to the end. I'm going to hand it over to Lucy. This is us. If you want to contact us, Lucy, you can take it over as well as the screen, and I will stop sharing.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. Just to remind to all of our attendees, feel free to submit your questions, as we're going to do the Q&A session now. Starting off, can you please explain what you mean by an open eco hardware system?
I'll take that one. So traditionally, when people have been exchanging digital data, when people have been starting on their journey with color measurement, they have been locked to using the hardware, software, all solutions from just one manufacturer. We've taken a step, we certainly believe, beyond that, because our software supports not only X-Rite instruments, but also appropriate instruments from other suppliers. Our net profiler solution supports not just X-Rite instruments, but also appropriate instruments from other suppliers. And what this does is, this is about reducing the barrier to entry. This is about ensuring that people who've already got some appropriate hardware are able to utilize that hardware and still deliver the accuracy and information that you would expect in order to make this whole color chain work. So it's an open ecosystem, which is really what we're supporting, is about maximizing what's out there and making best use of the equipment people already have where it's appropriate. You know, there are limitations. There are things that can't be corrected, but where it's appropriate, our software tools will allow those to be used.
Fantastic, thank you. Next question. You mentioned all the benefits of the Textile Color Hub. Are these proof point from internal? Are these proof point from internal X-Rite data or actual live client data?
It's actually client data. So we often have brands whereby we start a pilot, whereby what I say is hearsay. So they want to have proof points. And so during pilot phases, let's say, or the brands will look at the data we submitted and then talk to their supply chain. So they measure their own time to market, and they will speak to the suppliers about the reduction of waste and also the need for physical sampling. So 95% first time right, that is a supplier submitting the right information, digital data to the brand. So it's brand data, supplier data, not X-Rite data. So very powerful, very good.
And I'm sorry, I'm just going to add on to that. And that 95% right first time is validated by visual. We're not just talking about 95% where the numbers in the software say pass. We're talking about 95% where the numbers in the software say pass, and the physical samples have been validated again by external parties to match that performance. So we're very happy with those numbers.
Excellent, thank you. Next question. What percentage of deviation can be corrected by Net Profiler?
That's a really interesting question. It's not quite so easy to answer in a straightforward fashion, but let me explain how Net Profiler actually operates. So what Net Profiler does, as part of the Net Profiler kit, you receive obviously a piece of software and a set of pre-measured standard tiles. What Net Profiler does is you measure the tiles on your instrument, and these are then validated and corrected back to the instrument center point. Sorry, the center point of all of that class of instruments, and not that individual instrument, but the center point of all instruments. However, if not all variation can be corrected. If an instrument has become badly contaminated, if an instrument's been damaged during shipment, if somebody spilled some dye into the instrument, then Net Profiler will not only correct, but Net Profiler will also stop correcting. There is a point at which Net Profiler goes, I can't make it any better. And if that point is still outside of the specification, you will then fail Net Profiler, and that in itself serves as a trigger to get your instrument looked at and fixed by somebody in service. So it's not that we can say, well, 10% of all deviations are corrected by Net Profiler. It might be 90% of all deviations are corrected by Net Profiler. But the significant point is that Net Profiler corrects the deviations, and if it can't, it will then flag it to you so that you don't carry on making readings with an instrument that's actually delivering out of specification data. So that's almost as valuable as having the data corrected. You know that you are not making false judgments or incorrect judgments because the instrument that you have is out of spec. So that's how we tend to view it. And again, it's a hugely and widely used system so that we have a good level of confidence in its success.
Excellent, thank you very much. Next question. Have you seen the same process in socks due to the way socks are engineered with plating and elastic yarn affecting colour or final products?
Again, please, I'll take that one. And the answer is I'm very confident that the process will work. Do we have any current use cases in this field? The answer is no. We have a lot of experience in associated fields, particularly with multi-fiber kinds of constructions. We understand some of the challenges, so that's something that we'd, very happy to talk about, look at where the tools that we have will come into play. Certainly some of the things won't be so straightforward. It's not the same manufacturing route as you might do with a plain yarn dye or something like that. But the tools that are there certainly we believe will enhance and speed time to market significantly. So again, very happy to talk to anybody about that.
Excellent, thank you very much. Next question. I am a manufacturer of a digital textile printer. I'm using X-Rite, bear with me in the pronunciation, spectrophotometers.
Yep.
How else can I utilize X-Rite Pantone services to elevate my value and provide to my customers?
Let me take that one. I think, of course, and that is part of the poll question. So I hope, let's say, that Marwan said that he would like to talk to us. So what I would like to do, rather than answering this question during the webinar, take it offline, either by answer the question by Rav and myself, or by one of our sales managers around the globe, depending where the person who's asking the question is located. But for sure, let's say, we would like to work with you to elevate the value, what you can provide with our services and solutions.
Excellent, thank you. We'll just do a couple more now, if that's okay. So next question. Do you develop color manual for your brand clients?
Yes, so that was one of the poll questions. Yes, indeed. So it's already helping brands. If you look at the color maturity level, they might be on level 1 by introducing a specification document, which is also, or a color manual, which is what Raf said. It's the cornerstone. It's really the first step moving upwards on the color maturity ladder. And yes, we do that.
Excellent, thank you. And then we'll just have one final question. If you are at level 1, is it easy to get to level 4 of the maturity ladder? And how do you support your brand clients?
Yes, it is easy. It might, let's say, it involves, I would say, the brand itself and the supply chain. But with a lot of experience, let's say, helping brands to move from 1 to 4, and then develop a phased approach. And that phased approach can be by fabric most used. It can be by a certain region. So we've been working with a lot of brands to modify or tailor the approach in order to adopt a digital color workflow and go to the color maturity level 4.
Excellent, thank you. And we have just had a follow-up question about the spectrophotometers.
Yep.
There's a question that includes that they have around 18 mills in India, and their client in the US uses a different spectrophotometer.
Yep.
And they're wanting to create a bridge between the two.
Yep. Yep.
That's
We're very
exactly
interested
Yep. Exactly what we do.
Yep.
We sometimes work with much larger populations of instruments than that. Certainly that's not a problem. It's part of the program, and we then evaluate, analyze what are the instruments, what can be done with them. Yeah, definitely part of the program. Very happy to discuss and hopefully help somebody move forward to a greater level of success with that.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone. Just to be aware that this webinar has been recorded, and a video link will be sent to you within a week after today. Thank you so much, Peter and Raf, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, audience. Look forward to being in touch. Bye now.
Thank you all. Bye.